Here we are in The Hague on this cold February evening. But let me take you to a hot, beautiful summer evening, June 9 of the last year. The presidential election day in my country, Kazakhstan. The process of counting the votes is in a full swing, and I am coordinating a work of independent observers. And suddenly, my telephone rings. An observer screams that she is chasing after chairwoman from the election commission from one of the polling stations, who's simply running away with all the ballots. Can you imagine that? It's illegal, actually. And so, she's not alone. A bunch of international observers from the OSCE, the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, joined to her with chasing. And so, I joined the chase by the telephone. This chairwoman was caught by us, but unfortunately, without any appropriate legal consequences to her. Now, for those of you who can vote in Netherlands, I totally realize that for you, the election is not a big deal from the point of view of transparency procedures. But let me tell you why in Kazakhstan election, it is completely different ball game. But first, a bit of boring history. The Kazakhstan gained independence in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union. And since that, until June 9, 2019, there was only one man who had won every single election in Kazakhstan, President Nazarbayev. Understandably, Kazakhstani civil society and international organizations, such as Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, always raised questions and concerns about the transparency procedure of Kazakhstani election. But surprisingly, in April of 2009, President Nazarbayev announced his resignation. That means we had to act, and act fast. There was no time to waste. We needed to select and train observers as fast as it was possible. We had only 2 months to get things going. It was stressful, but exciting at the same time. We managed to recruit around 100 honest citizens who would act as observers throughout the Kazakhstan. We need to train people up in the field of electoral and observation procedures, as well as understanding special electoral law to clarify and identify different kind of violation during the observation period. Moreover, last election was different because there were a rise of protest activity of citizens in Kazakhstan, which was manifested by protest vote. Simply put, citizens began to vote not for some opposition candidate, but against the current candidate, who was the successor of President Nazarbayev. Things are heating up. Our observers were faced with a huge number of violations, where local authorities decide to take control of situation and reduce the impact of protest activity. Our observers were hassled, intimidated, dragged away from the polling station by the police. Information of the mass violations began to be recorded by our observers. And this information of violations began to flow through social networks. As a result, our authorities were alarmed and started to block mobile networks in the capital and the other cities. Amazingly, as a result of the work of observers and citizens who supported protest vote, the vote count showed that in the first time in the history of independent Kazakhstan, the candidate from current governmental party had managed always to receive only 70% of vote, whereas the President Nazarbayev always received more than 95% for the last 25 years. Can you imagine that? Despite the results, My clear conviction is that the true winners of the last election in Kazakhstan were ultimately observers. Observers who, despite the pressure, demonstrate stamina, courage, and character. They showed that the collective actions of the huge amount of people can change a situation. They made our government understand that a principled, independent observer will always be a part of the election process. And through his work, the voice of people must be always heard. Thank you.